Hey everybody, so Bob Cooney here, and we are going to recap the Amusement Expo. So I spent the last 3 days in Las Vegas at the convention center. Hey Eric, thanks for joining. Yeah, we had a really good day. The VR Summit on Tuesday was amazing. I want to thank all of the speakers who went out of their way to travel some amazing distances like Australia and Finland and Germany and hey, thanks Molly, and San Diego, yeah, Andre, and really all over the world and all over the country, and they came to share their learnings and their expertise and their insights, and I think we had a really good time, and everybody seemed to have fun and lots of partying, of which I didn't partake because I turned 55 this week, and I guess now I'm on old fuck. So the seminars on Tuesday just took a lot out of me. But anyway, and then Wednesday and Thursday we had the show, and there was a bunch of new products. So I'm going to try to cover as much of that as I can. But first, we're going to start with some of the insights from the VR Summit. And just going to cover, I'm going to put I did record all the videos, and I'm going to put all of that up on my YouTube page soon. So keep an eye up for that. And I'll email everybody to let you know. So you'll be able to watch all of the content from the VR Summit in its entirety with subtitles, hopefully. So, because there were some complaints about some of the audio. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and flip through. So we're going to talk about the VR Summit. Kind of cover some of the key insights from the panels. I'm going to go through what I found that was new at the show and give you some of my insights and opinions on that stuff. Some of the other stuff that was there, we'll talk about real coverly, and then a little bit about what's coming down the pike. So, so this was the second year we did the VR Summit at Amusement Expo. For those of you that don't know, Amusement Expo is kind of a long-running kind of amusement game, arcade game, laser tag conference. It was co-located this year at the same time. There was the nightclub and bar show, which was going on. There was a digital signage expo that was going on. So there was a lot happening in town. I didn't even get a chance to check any of that out because we were just so busy with all the amusement stuff. So one of the things we started out with, I'm going to go ahead and was Alexis Macklin came in from Greenlight Insights. And if you're not familiar with Greenlight, you should check them out online. Just Google search Greenlight Insights. They cover the VR industry as analysts. They specifically also cover the location-based VR industry. And there was some really interesting statistics that Alexis brought out. I got some screenshots from the video that we shot just to kind of talk about those. And one of those is, really we're seeing real serious growth in location-based VR and less so, but AR, and they project that we're going to continue to see what they're calling hyper growth over the next through at least 2021. So we're going to see the more and more location-based virtual reality hitting the market. The other thing she was, and this is the thing I love, is like the no BS zone, right? And so they talked about the closure rate, and as I predicted, a lot of locations are closing, and I think I expect us to continue to see the closure rate continue, but new openings have outpaced closings, which is good, which is why the industry is going to continue to grow. She talked a little bit about the segments as to where you're seeing VR show up, and the biggest segment are these, what they're calling standard arcades, which are room scale primarily Vive based VR things. And you're seeing entertainment centers. There's a really small sliver, only 3%, which I think is really small, and probably the area that's going to be growing the most in the future. And we're also seeing more venues dedicated to VR. That was another prediction I made last year, which is we were going to start to see more of these kind of VR focused amusement centers and entertainment centers. And I'm talking to more and more operators. There's all kinds of stuff happening on the development side where you're going to see, and not just VR, but really immersive entertainment. You're going to see the combination of VR and AR and projection mapping and all of this stuff create these really super immersive amusement centers and entertainment centers in the next year or two. You can see them happening everywhere. And I thought this was really interesting. On average, venues will earn over $500,000 from VR related installations in 2019. So now, obviously, you know, the theme parks are a big piece of that, and you'll have to go back and watch the video to get a little bit more insights. But you know, there's real money in virtual reality. I think somebody wrote a book about that. I'm not sure who that was. Maybe that was me. That you can get on my website. Hey, that's a great segue. And I think I can actually somewhere here. Yeah, I don't know. It's over here. Let's see. Bob's book. There you go. If you haven't gotten it yet, grab a copy of it. It's fun. It's entertaining, and you might learn something. So then we went on to we had a couple of keynotes, and then we had a panel. I spent most of my time on the panels. But one of the things that Cheryl Bindleglass from Cheryl Grolf talked about is she talked a lot about group sales, and it was really interesting. She's like, how do you find them? And she would go to like meetups. So one of the great things she talked about was like creating competition. So she has gone to, like, for example, create a competition between the fire department and the police department. And I was like, well, how do you do that? And she said she actually just like went and found out where these people meet, and she crashes conferences and crashes parties and networks, and that's a pretty bold thing. And if you're an extrovert, you might be comfortable doing that. But what she said she did is she actually called like the local community fire captain and said that the police chief said that they would own them in this particular thing. And so if you're doing VR, you have a VR, let's say you have a free roam VR situation game, you can go say, hey, the fire captain said that he was going to kick your butt, or that the fireman would kick the policeman's butt, and the policeman would be like, well, what are you talking about? We would totally own them, and then go back to the fire captain and say, well, yeah, the police guy said he was going to own you, and like create this little local community war. And then you could turn it into a fundraiser. Lots of cool stuff you can do if you're really creative and inventive. So anyway, I think there's some really interesting, real tricks to creating events and group events, which is about 30 to 70% of the revenue from successful VR sites. So it's another insight that came in. So then we had a panel about escape rooms and storytelling. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting is that most of the people that were developing these games, and so Cyril from Ubisoft was there, and Sven from Exit VR was there, and they both said in their second adventures, they're actually making them longer. The first ones were in that kind of 40 to 45 minutes, and they're actually pushing more to that 50 to 55, 60 minute to try to get more into that, into the escape room timeline. But interesting that these guys are all, from their experience of building what were long form VR experiences, some of them are actually going to go longer. Simon Chu said he's going a bit shorter on his, but I think there's a real place for this long form VR in the industry, and so keep an eye for more of that coming. And then we had a panel around kind of this convergence of laser tag and VR and PvP, or player versus player as it's called, and competitive VR. And we had Philip from Tower Tag and Armando from Creative Works, who does both. You know, they both sell Hologate, but they also have a long history in laser tag. And Michael Zaidan from Minority Media, who just launched their Reclaim player versus player, and Chanel Summers from VR Studios, who had their Power Play VR at IAPA. They didn't have it on display here. They weren't exhibiting, but I think it was, the thing that came out is people love competition. Like, they just really love to compete. And people of all ages, kids, adults, everybody. And then the other thing, though, is that we talked about is leveling these player versus player games is hard. If you get somebody in there who's really good at these games and they're up against somebody who isn't as good, it can not be fun for the person who isn't as good. And then you wind up potentially losing them. And we had a really active debate around whose responsibility was that. I think Michael Zaidan was claiming that his game designers were saying it's the operator's responsibility to manage that. And I think Philip from Tower Tag was saying, no, that's the game designer's responsibility to do. So I think that leveling is something that we're going to see more of challenge. And traditional arcade games do a really good job of that, and the racers are a great example where, in the racing games, there's a thing called rubber banding. And what they do is if you fall too far behind, they give you things to pull you forward. So you always feel like you've got a chance to be in the winning position. And oftentimes you can slingshot yourself forward. And so it's hard to do, and game developers in these player versus player games are still developing those skills. So we'll see how that develops. And then we had a free roam panel. I was really a bit disappointed that some of the other free roam guys didn't show, but we had Tammy from Dreamscape and Tim from Zero Latency. And it was kind of an interesting juxtaposition where Dreamscape is doing these kind of shorter, really story-driven experiences with lots of environmental haptics. So, you can reach out and touch the animal at the alien zoo and you grab things and everything is hand tracking and foot tracking. And I think Zero Latency's, has been, let's create an open warehouse where there's nothing and we can change things up and have people walk a lot. And those are two different ways, but the theme was immersion and deep immersion. So people do VR to be immersed. That's the whole thing that it does better than any other amusement technology. And so, the way they get immersion, they go about creating these really deep immersions in these high-end VR experiences were both very different, but they're both effective. And so the haptic experiences, like Dreamscape and the Void and Nomadic, those tend to be shorter because they're more expensive to build because you got all that. First of all, you have to use optical tracking to track objects, and all of that stuff's expensive. And so they tend to have to run shorter experiences to get more throughput. But that creates a really deep immersion because when you touch something, it's there, it happens faster. Zero Latency's thing is, let's have you walk. And Tim said that recently they had somebody walked over a kilometer in one of their games. And I find the longer you're in it and the more you travel in it in real space, the deeper that immersion gets. So different approaches to the same thing. And they both work. So I thought that was interesting. They also talked about, we talked about a lot of things. You can watch the video online. Then we got to this Go Big or Go Home panel, which had Bill Tustin from CenterTech, Aaron Polka from 2-Bit Circus, and Jan Hursti from Pixeli in Finland. And they all run large VR arcades. So Bill Tustin has 30 plus stations. I think Jan, the least he has in one of his is 16 or 18. He runs over 60 altogether amongst several locations. Aaron Polka's in 35,000 square feet at 2-Bit Circus. And they really talked about how their scale allows them to do things that are key to their profitability. Running big groups, school groups, run conferences. 2-Bit Circus is going to host the VentureBeat conference in a few weeks in April in LA. And so the ability to do birthday parties, corporate events, which is 30, 40, 50, 60% of their revenue, is due to the size. And I think they all agreed that if you're going to do this and you're going to open 4 stations, 6 stations, you're really going to struggle to be profitable. And so kind of that whole go big or don't go at all theme was really relevant, I think, on this panel. And then I had a really good fireside chat with Tim at Zero Latency, and we really talked about disruption and how do you disrupt yourself. So, Zero Latency came out first. They were really early. Their product was really expensive. It was over $600,000 US. They saw the trend going from, these outside-in optical tracking systems that were expensive. Lots and lots of cameras, miles and miles of cable, stacks of servers and switches. And now what they've done is they've switched over to this inside-out SLAM tracking, where the tracking is all in the headset on the player, and it gives you it actually gives you a better experience from a tracking and latency standpoint, just much more responsive. And the challenge of disrupting yourself and the importance of it. Because in a fast-moving technical environment where the technology is evolving, not just yearly, but quarterly in some cases, you've got to be willing to just like throw away the old shit and move on to whatever's coming new to stay relevant. And one of the challenges is too, and there's 2 levels of technology disruption that's happening. There's the B2B part, right? Because everybody building solutions in this market is kind of B2B2C. They're building solutions that they sell to operators who then sell the experience to the consumers. And there's, the operators, just because it's becoming obsolete to the operator doesn't necessarily mean that the experience is obsolete on the consumer side. So there's two parts of that you have to consider. And the guys that are operating zero latency, a lot of them are thinking about upgrading to this new system because it's lighter and the resolution's better on the headsets, and I think the customer experience is better. So you really got to make sure that when you're investing in these things that you're on the front end of the technology curve, not on the back end of the technology curve, especially if the technology change is going to lead to a better customer experience. So we had a really good conversation around disruption. And then we had a panel that was about don't sweat the small stuff. And there were a couple of things. And one of the things we talked about was hygiene. We had Amy Hedrick from Cleanbox, and they make a system that cleans and disinfects headsets. And we had Dave and Buster's on the panel. We had Cheryl on the panel, and we all talked about hygiene and how it really is theater. A lot of it is theater. Even Dave and Buster's admitted they do it, and it's important, but there's a large segment of the audience that doesn't care, but there is a segment of the audience that does care. And so make sure that not only are you cleaning the headsets, but you're showing people that you're cleaning the headsets, and that's really, really important. And the other thing was, Dave and Buster's came out and admitted that they'd underpriced that attraction, which I've been saying since before they actually launched it. They came out at $5. They've recently raised it up as high as $7, and they're sensing that there might be some more upward pricing ability there. And so, I think this was a consistent thing on a lot of the panels. There's headroom on the pricing, and as an industry, we're still underpricing these really amazing transformational experiences. And so it was good to see Dave and Buster's getting in line there. And then the last thing on this panel was employees are really critical. Like Dave and Buster's talked about how they invested 3 months in training their employees leading up to the deployment of their Jurassic World ride. And even then they didn't even get it right, they said. And that, that the number one indicator for customer satisfaction is employee engagement. And, I even talked a little bit about how the VR park in Belgium is using Net Promoter to across all of their experiences to measure guest satisfaction. And the thing that they found is the number one driver of their Net Promoter score is the employee who greets them at the cafe when they walk in the door actually has the highest impact on people's impression of the overall customer experience over an hour-long adventure. So employee engagement is really, really critical in this stuff. And then we had a marketing panel talking about how to launch. And I'm going to see if I can add this here. So Virtuix was nice enough to share a white paper, which I highly recommend downloading. It's the culmination of 3 different blog posts that they've done. And so download it here right now. And they talked about launching some of the things they did on the marketing side to successfully launch their first Virtuix. I'm going to try to get the name right. Omniverse VR Arena at Pinballs in Austin, Texas. And they use Facebook paid advertising. And one of the things they found was a high percentage. I don't remember the numbers, but it was more than 50% of the people, maybe as high as 80% of the people came during that launch event that had never been to Pinballs before. And so that was key. So download that white paper, check it out. The other thing is they all talked about is gather video content. When you're launching a VR attraction, get video interviews of the customers coming out and playing it and use that on social media. So that was a key one. And then the other one is the VR brings in new customers. It's bringing in people who aren't coming to family entertainment centers. They're not going out. They're playing Fortnite at home. They're playing Apex Legends. They're watching Netflix. They're binge watching TV. And that was another thing, is like the number one competitor to out-of-home entertainment right now is in-home entertainment. You're not competing with, if you think you're in an FEC and you're competing with trampoline parks, you might be focused on the wrong competitor. Then we had a really, I thought this was a really interesting panel called VR Everywhere. And so we had We were talking about, VR in movie theaters, VR in airports, VR in bars and pubs and restaurants and nightclubs. And, I think the big insight here is, this stuff can fit in places you wouldn't think. Lynn from Periscape VR, which operates in JFK Airport, they've just recently raised their prices 3 times. They went from $1 a minute to $2 a minute to $3 a minute. And they're going to be expanding into airports around the world. Chris Crescatelli and Wesley from Ecstasis, Chris is from VR Arcade, and who ran a great event at Omnia. They're putting these like VRs in VRs. I hate that. VR attractions in high-end nightclubs. Wesley was talking about how they do VR in an EDM club. And what they do is they really select, and this was another thing that was an insight, is select content that's contextually relevant to what your consumer is thinking about doing. So one of the things that Greg D'Agostini talked about is when he puts it in bars, he uses Creed, which is kind of like this player versus player fighting game. And he runs contests because people go to bars. It's kind of a blue collar thing. And they love the fighting game and the Rocky. And he's in Philadelphia, so they do the whole Rocky thing. And he gets massive engagement and massive usage and lines of people to pay to play in bars because he selects the right content for the location. Wesley's doing, high energy games like Space Pirate Trainer, where, EDM music is actually a part of the experience because he's in an EDM club. And so, and I think in the movie theaters, they're looking for story-driven, movie-themed content based on the movies that are playing. And so context is really important in selecting the content that you provide in these new locations. So I thought that was a really good insight. And then, we did a tech panel. So we had Microsoft, HP, we had Kevin Williams, who's a good friend of mine who really he really tracks the technology and who's using what in the tech space. And then we had Scott Van Keelar who's the CTO for Zero Latency, who I think is frankly, one of the smartest guys in the tech side in the amusement industry. I'm really, in the VR industry, really been impressed what they pull off. And I asked them what some of the future technical trends that they're excited about. And one of the ones that came out was pass-through video. And so you're starting to see some stuff emerge. And this came out of GDC a couple of weeks ago in San Francisco, maybe only last week, where the inside-out tracking headsets that have cameras built into them, because what SLAM does is it looks at the environment and tracks the user in relation to the environment. And so to do that, it has to have cameras. And so now what the headset manufacturers are doing, allowing through firmware, the solution providers to actually expose that video to the user. So what that means is you can actually you can actually see what you're seeing in real life through the video. So it's kind of like augmented reality. And so the first usage of that is going to be, how you put your headset on and now you don't see anything, and moving around in the physical space, if you're not being tracked yet, is hard. So what you'll be able to do is put on the headset in the queuing area, let's say, and actually see what's going on, walk into the track space, and then they can flip off the video, and now you're just in the virtual world. So it's going to make the operational input and getting people in and out of the experiences a lot easier without making them take the headset off, or maybe put it on your forehead and then tilt it back down. And so I think operations are going to get easier with pass-through video, and then eventually you'll start to see some augmented reality stuff happen there. And that was the other thing, is that now we're seeing AR and VR merging. I think a lot of people, the conventional wisdom, by the way, I never bought into this, but conventional wisdom that, AR headsets were going to, be bigger than maybe even replace VR headsets. But I think what you're seeing is that augmented reality capability is being built into and enabled in the VR headsets. And so you're seeing AR and VR merge or converge, as Charlie Fink would say. And it's going to be really interesting to see how that kind of comes out in, VR solutions and consumer experiences and location-based VR in the next year. And then the other thing that Scott said, which I thought was really interesting, is as much as they're a technology-focused company, it's like they don't focus on the technology. They don't start with tech. They start with what's the consumer experience that they're trying to create. And then they figure out how can they use technology to enable that. And I don't think there's enough of that. I think there's too many people still in this industry that are so enamored with the technology that they're being tech-led, and you need to be consumer experience-led and then use the technology in ways that allow you to create amazing consumer experiences. And everybody on the tech panel agreed with that. I'd say 15% of the talk or 20% of the talk around this was like, don't get lost in the tech, focus on the experience, which I thought was interesting from a bunch of technology companies. We also had a panel about esports, and there's a lot of talk about esports in both in and out of VR and in location-based entertainment. And so, you know, Steve Grubbs, who's doing has a business called Paradigm in Davenport, Iowa, in my mind, is doing the most interesting stuff in esports, along with Jan from Virtuix. And Steve's been running an esports facility with both VR esports and PC-based esports for a while now. He's published a great blog post on LinkedIn. If you don't follow him, go find Steve Grubbs on LinkedIn and check out his activity. And in his most recent activity, you'll see the article, and he had a bunch of insights. But the big one was about community. It's like, you know, esports is about building a local community, and stop thinking about esports arenas as these big destination facilities like you have them in Las Vegas or in LA or the new one in Philadelphia, because that's not our business. Our business is community entertainment. And I think he's done a really good job of that. And to do that, you have to have consistency. And he's been running weekly tournaments for a long time, and they build week on week on week. And you can't just do this 2 or 3 times and expect it to, you know, take off. You got to commit to the long term. So if you're going to do esports in VR, commit to doing it, go in hard and do it. Commit to a year, commit to 6 months, and watch it build over time. The other thing that they came up was the platform Discord. The esports community is on Discord. If you don't know what Discord is, go check it out. It's kind of it's the new, you know, social communication platform for gamers. And so everybody talks about Twitch for video streaming, and Discord is the other part of that. So if you're going to do esports, you need to build a community around Discord. And then we wrapped up the day with a fireside chat with Jake Zim from Sony Pictures Entertainment, which is the movie studio. Jake runs the VR practice there, and he's really passionate about location-based VR, and they're doing some really aggressive things about pushing their IP into the market. And, you know, they started out with The Void and their Ghostbusters experience at Madame Tussauds. Since then, they've done a lot of licensing. They've licensed Angry Birds to Hologate. He teased a bunch of stuff that's going to be coming in the future, and then was really open to having conversations with solution providers about using their IP. And the thing that he talked about is they have this massive marketing engine. So what movie studios do, he wanted to do, you know, he said the president of Sony Pictures Entertainment, you know, his big thing is Lawrence of Arabia, and like this epic adventure. And so one of the things that Jake was open to is approaches. If you have an idea for how to use their IP in a great location-based VR solution, if you want an introduction, just reach out to me. You can send me an email at vrbob@bobcooney.com. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Facebook, however you want to get me. And by the way, I know you guys are all on there anyway, but if you're not on my Facebook group, make sure you join, because you can always get me there. And it's free, and we've got a great community, over 700 people now in that group. And Jake's on there also. And so we can message each other. But if you're interested in content, reach out, and let's get you talking to Sony and see what they've got. They've got some amazing intellectual property. And one of the questions was, you know, do they have a list? And he said they don't have a list, because actually in the studio, they don't even have a list, because the licensing is and ownership rights and everything are really complex. So you just have to do a bit of an exploration. But their marketing engine is significant. And one of the things he talked about is being able to leverage that. And they spend, like, if a movie costs 50 million or 100 million or 200 million, they'll spend 50 million or 100 million or 200 million marketing that. And by the way, if you're doing marketing in VR, like, that's a key thing, is you got to spend money to market. Even the big blockbuster tentpole features, as they call them, they spend hundreds of millions marketing them to get them in the the zeitgeist and into the consciousness of people that are thinking about what they're going to do to get them off the couch and stop watching Netflix or playing Fortnite and go to a movie theater. And so if you license IP, they're willing to bring their marketing army. They have, they have teams on the street that can come out and do pop-ups. They have massive social media reach that they can drive. And he talked about when Angry Birds launches on Hologate this summer, they're going to have a website. They're going to have a list of all the Hologate locations that are running Angry Birds, and they're going to be promoting that. So Sony's going to be promoting that around it. So I think IP, and at least Sony's being super aggressive on that. I love that. So yeah, Eric, yeah, Discord, man. Your son's right on. We should get him. We should make sure he's working in the industry if he isn't already. So what was new at the summit? So the next day, Wednesday and Thursday, was Amusement Expo, and we had a trade show. It was really busy. I will say on Wednesday, the last day of a show is always a little bit slow, but Wednesday was really busy. The feedback from I think the exhibitors was really strong. Yeah, it's not IAPA, but I think there's a lot of there were a lot of serious buyers at this show. And so I'm going to go through as much as I can, and I think I'm going to be able to cover all of these with some photos. So one of the big things that happened, Joanna Popper from HP, who shared a lot of these photos that I'm going to be using, by the way, she's awesome, brought their new headset to show. It was just released at GDC last week. It is, I think the zero latency guys are going to be adopting this in their new platform. They were showing it in their booth. And the thing about it was, I think the biggest thing about it was its resolution. Now, you've probably heard me say that I think resolution is overblown for location-based VR. I've done everything from mobile headsets, which have relatively low resolution, to Star VR, which has ridiculously high resolution and wide field of view. I think field of view is more important than resolution. I think that for most people, they don't notice it because they get in VR and they're just, wow, it's amazing. There are some places where resolution makes a difference. And where this one really made a difference was in text. So if you're building anything where you have to read, like an escape room, or you have things in the distance you're trying to make out, resolution actually does matter. And this is like 4K video, which is for a $500 headset, or maybe even a $400 headset. I'm not sure what the retail pricing on this thing is pretty impressive. And I will say that the screen door effect was almost gone. And so the resolution was impressive. It was super comfortable. It was super lightweight to wear, and really great to see somebody saying maybe $799, whatever. What's a few $100s amongst friends? And I think that for the most part, the price on a B2B2C market is irrelevant. It's got to work. It felt really durable to me. And obviously there's going to be some more customization happening by the solution providers as far as making sure the right foam is on, that it's cleanable, etc. But anyway, people seemed really impressed with it. There's my friend Wyatt Bushnell on the right here using it with his Pac-Man jacket. Yeah, everybody seemed to really like it. I think Minority Media had a great show. They showed a new game. It was an alpha build of their player versus player competitive game called Reclaim. And you'll notice at the very top of the leaderboard there, at the end of the 2-day show, was this guy named Bob. I don't know. He might be good at this shit. But I really had a blast with it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought I gave them some feedback for an alpha build. I thought it was really good. So I even see Kylie down there in the top 12, which is amazing. So it was really easy to get in and play. I can see they're going to be working hard on mastering. And one of the things I talked to them about their product roadmap, which was really important, was they've got a really substantial roadmap around. I don't know if I have it in here. I'm going to see if I can. If I was able to grab it. Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get it from them in time. But they're going to be doing player classes where you can select different characters, and the different characters have different different functionalities. Actually, I might have it here. Let me see if I can do a screen share. I think I can. Let's try this. Let's change it up a little bit. So Michael's Idan sent this to me, and I'm going to see if I can, how do I screen share? I think I turned my camera on, maybe. Hi, everybody. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe not. Sorry. Oh, well. Oh, if I stop sharing slides, then maybe I can screen share. This is thrilling, isn't it? Watching me how to use a share your screen. There it is. Woohoo! All right. And application window. There it is. So they're going to start out. They've got 3 maps. They got a beginner map, which is a small area where there's no hiding and it's really kind of high paced. Then they're going to go to a large map with grenades and tactical shots and distance combat. And then they're going to go to an expert map, which is, more hiding and tracking. And I think that was the map that we were playing yesterday. Felt more expert. You had to kind of jump around a lot to try to find the people. The thing I'm really interested in, initially, it was a 4-player all against everybody. They're going to go to team play in version 2, which is going to come out in Q2. They're going to have different power-ups with different weapons. And they're going to have different player classes, which is I really like. So you can be a destroyer or a tank or a ninja, depending on how you want to play. And all of this stuff is going to drive repeat play. And that's really key in the FEC business, I think. And then in Q4, they're bringing operator tools for tournaments and a queuing system where you'll be able to, put in your phone number and text you. And then they're going to be doing what they're calling rig versus rig, where you can link two of these rigs together in a player versus player and have 8 people, teams of 4-on-4 play. And I think the reason that that's really interesting is because I'm going to go back to the slides. No, let's go back here. Is because the size of that thing, and I've got to go to it here. It's really super small. It's it's only 12 by 12 feet, and so it's almost like a deluxe arcade game size. Yeah, Eric, I think over the internet, probably my guess is going to be a 2020 initiative. I know a lot of people are talking about that. The only company I know doing that right now is Neurogaming with their Polygon system, and even that is only in a few locations. So my guess is we'll start to see, and that's a real challenge, by the way. Over the what is it? Synchronous play, right, is a challenge in location over location. When you have it on the consumer market, and you have lots of people playing, millions of people, it's easy to get matches going. But if you have locations, how do you start and coordinate the start of the match in one location over another? It creates a level of operational complexity that's actually kind of difficult. And so I think the whole notion of location-based entertainment is people playing together in the same location. That's why we do it. So I don't know if site versus site, while it sounds cool, I just don't know if it's really practical. So anyway, one of the other companies that I thought, just making some progress. I don't think this one's ready. I don't think this one's necessarily total recoil. Their bug hunt, you'll notice they're really working on the cabinet. They're doing some tests in a couple of locations, getting a lot of feedback. They've got now 3 games on there, or 3 different levels, and they're still working. They've got power-ups now that you can shoot. They've got different bug classes that work at different speeds. So these guys are still testing things. And my guess is later this summer, you'll see them relaunch that product and with some really strong. They're getting really good results in a couple of locations, but they're not quite ready for prime time yet. It's a really interesting approach too. So when they first came out, they created a 1-player game, and they realized that that was a mistake, that you can't operate a 1-player location-based attended attraction profitably. So then they came back with a multiplayer game. Sorry, I'm drinking coffee. And now they have this PvP, and one of the things they realize now so it's really interesting. They went from 1-player to 4-player, and now they said, screw it, let's put 6 players in there. And so they have this 20 by 20 space or 20 by 18 space or whatever it is. And they've crammed 6 players in there to try to drive more throughput. I did talk to several people that said they collided with other players. I didn't have that experience myself. I played their pirate game, which was basically a copy of, or inspired by, I like to say, the Revolver game from Neurogaming, which is in the Exit Reality Arc arena. And I think Revolver is one of the best PvP games that I've ever played. And they kind of copied it, but they didn't. I told them this. I don't think they did a great job of it. I think they copied the obvious stuff. So they had the different avatars, which were cool, and you respawn in different areas, which is cool. And the music was fun, and the environment was amazing. You're on a pirate ship, and you're all different, these like pirate characters. I thought the graphics were amazing. But what they missed was the hard part. And the hard part of what Revolver's done really well is the geometry of the game. And so what they do amazingly well is you can, the angles of attack and defense, you can position yourself in your space to where you're never exposed to more than one player at a time, or two at the most. And I think Inowise has to go back to the drawing board on that, because there were times where I was like fully in conceal mode in front of me, but somebody could shoot me from in the back and I never knew who it was. And so I was constantly getting shot by people that I didn't know where they were. And after a while, I felt frustrated and kind of disengaged from the game a bit. And so I think there's more work to be done here, but I do think the environments were good. And I do think that like cramming more people in is better for throughput, as long as they're not colliding with each other. I think the surprise hit of the show, frankly, was Vex. These guys, I did this at EAS in Amsterdam in September, which is the Euro Attraction show, which is IAPA's European show. And they had a pretty good showing there, which was really their unveiling. It was their first showing in America. They're being represented in America by a company called ARC Attractions, ARC, out of Florida, who builds laser tag arenas. So obviously they saw the success of Hologate with Creative Works and said, let's take that same model. What Vex does really uniquely is they've created what I call almost void-like environmental haptics in a small, compact, inexpensive arena. So it's a 20 by 20 setup. It is maybe a little bit smaller than that. It fit in a 20 by 20 booth, so maybe it's 17 by 17. It is a 4-player backpack system. It's got a haptic floor. It's got heat, it's got wind, and it's got smell built in. It has a haptic vest from B Haptics, and it has Leap Motion. So they've crammed an amazing amount of shit into this small space, and they use it really effectively. The game that I played was about I want to say it was about a 15-minute game. It was a zombie shooter. It was co-op. At one point, they broke us into teams. There were 3 different skill levels you could select from as a player. So the first level, everybody plays together. Then they split you up into teams of 2. And, you select, you want the easy, medium, and hard. We selected the hard level. And it was really intense and really fun. And there was definitely a sense of peril. There was some story around it. It was really well done. And I've told them I think they're underpricing this attraction. It's coming in at about $125K US. Plus some licensing fees. And one of the things they announced at the show is that Eclipse from Backlight is going to be available in that platform, which is a 4-player escape room attraction, again, that I did at IAPA that I really liked. There'll be additional significant licensing fees of that of I want to say it's $20,000 or something like that per year. But they're going to be opening up their platform for them to allow third parties to publish on it. And so I think these guys are going to be, I think they're going to be a real competitor in this space. And I think I thought the experience was really good. I think that this is a different price point. I was talking to my friend Michael Getlin, who's a longtime operator, and I think this is something that I would probably price at the consumer level in that $20 to $30 range. It's not like if somebody buys this and prices it at $10, I'm going to come and I'm going to hit you with a stick. So don't underprice this. It's a high-end, void-like experience in a low-cost package that can fit inside an FEC. And I expect to see a lot of these out in the marketplace in the next year. Another company that was there, Modal, and the thing about Modal that for me was exciting is you can see they're using the Vive Quest, so they've pivoted from HTC from the Vive to the Vive Quest, which is an all-in-one SLAM-based headset. The games I still think leave a lot to be desired. I'm sorry, Vive Focus, Oculus's Quest. Thank you. I still think the games, are still on the low end, really super casual. But they're heading in the right direction. And now that they've got Vive Focus, my guess is they'll be able to really solidify on that practice. I think my guess is you'll see the experiences increase in quality and immersion. They're pricing it at $50,000 for 4 players, which is some people will say all you're getting is 4 headsets for $50,000. I think there's some talk about a video wall and stuff in it. I couldn't find that in their marketing materials, and unfortunately, it was the end of the day. So you'll have to reach out to them directly to find out exactly what you get for $50,000. There's another conversation I had with a guy around the price point around zero latency. They announced their price point on their new inside-out based system, which was $199,000 for 10 packs, which in my opinion is not enough. But if you want to get started, it's a good way to get started, and then you'll realize you need more packs because an 8-player system, if you really want to get the throughput you need 8 being suited up and 8 playing and at least a couple of spares. And depending on how long of an attraction you run, if you run a 30-minute game and you don't want to beat the crap out of your employees, you might want another set of 8 being cleaned and batteries swapped out. But you can buy the packs now for $3,500 with the headset and the backpack and everything. It's a HP setup, right? So there's no proprietary hardware. You can buy the shit on Amazon. So a lot of transparency now happening in the pricing game. And one of the operators asked me, he's like, well, yeah, if you get 10 packs and the packs are $3,500, it's only $35,000. Why am I paying $200,000? And so for anybody asking that, if you're running a business, think about how much goes into running your business. There's a lot of development that goes into, and I'll speak specifically on the zero latency side, into the back end, the platform, the ticketing engine, the content development. Like it's expensive to do that shit. And these companies need money to breathe on and to grow. And so, if you want to do it yourself and build your own stuff, go do it yourself. Buy some shit off the shelf and try to develop games and platforms and back end and see how much it costs you. And then you realize that maybe it's cheaper to buy something from one of these companies that's working hard to bring the shit to market. Just a little bit of feedback there. And then, this was Tailon Systems. So Tailon Simulators out of Florida, Brandon Nades and his friends there. A scrappy startup bringing a motion simulator-based VR suite to market, and they've been working on this for a couple of years now. And every time they bring it to a show, it gets better and better and better. They had a roller coaster type. It's not even a roller coaster. It's a flying simulator, and you're shooting at things, flying through the city. They've got a whole library of experiences. I think this is going to be priced in that like $40K for 1, $70K for 2 range. So a little bit on the high end, but for a interactive motion simulator, maybe not. And I would keep an eye on these guys. And my guess is by IAPA, this thing's going to be done and ready to launch, and they'll have a complete package. So that's from Tailon Simulations. And then I just want you to know I bleed for you guys, man. I'm out there trying out this shit. And so you don't have to. This was an injury that I suffered playing the Ubisoft Assassin's Creed game on the Triotech booth. And I was really, really, to be honest with you, a bit shocked and surprised that, Andre said, it's not epic until Bob bleeds. But at the end of that experience, you walk out on the ledge, you take the leap of faith. And, and I fell down. I was screaming at the end. I kind of like put my arm out and to get my balance, and I touched something. I hit something that wasn't in the game. And so, the Ubisoft thing, they have a railing in that little 10 by 10 square that you walk around. And it was sharp. There was a sharp piece on it, and I cut my finger. And then I went to the guy, and he was like, "Oh, I don't see it. It's rubber. How did you do it?" And he got really defensive. He was asking me to show him where I hurt myself, and I'm like, here's the evidence. You find it out. Not my job to figure it out. But if you're bringing shit into the location-based market, don't let people hurt themselves. It's really the last thing you want is something like this blown up with a mom on social media, and all the crap that goes along with it. So be really careful when you're building this shit. Anyway, yeah, first name, last name. I didn't actually fill out that slide, so I'll end it on this one. So somebody was asking a question. If you got questions, go ahead and post them here. But somebody's asking about the Oculus Quest, and I guess that's I think Vive Focus, Oculus Quest, both fit in that all-in-one headset. The Pico has a really good headset in that space too. I don't think it necessarily matters which headset you're using there for LBVR. I think the question is, how do the high-end mobile headsets, compete with the backpack-based headsets? And I think Steve Grubbs talked about is he's got a fraud dissection app that he's bringing out to education, and the graphics are just too intensive to run on the mobile stuff. Most of these are running the 835 chipset. We'll start to see the 845 from Qualcomm Snapdragon later this year, maybe, and it won't be until we get to the 855 where we probably get the really high-end graphics and 5G and streaming. So I think you're a couple of years away from the all-in-one backpackless systems or tethered systems really being able to compete with what's out there in the market now from a rendering standpoint. So, and again, we'll see what happens with the consumer market. It was really GDC last week, and this week in China, I think Vive had their big conference, and they were talking about Vive Focus Plus, which they just released in the home market at $800, and they're talking about its ability to stream 360 video from the home, and you can consume PC games to the headset and watch them on a big screen. And I watched that whole presentation from Alvin, and to be honest with you, they're still trying to sell these headsets as replacement for monitors, and I just don't see why I'd want to strap on a headset when I have a 4K monitor at 200 frames per second in front of me, and play a game streaming it wirelessly to my headset instead, and not know what's going on in the room around me. It just doesn't seem like a very good use case. So, oh yes, thank you, Shashank. Bears. I didn't have any photos of it. I apologize. I've got a video. I'll be doing a video, but I'm really glad you brought that up. I did the Bears. So we play VR, distributed by Namco. So Bears. I didn't know anything about this IP, by the way. So I actually went on YouTube and watched a couple of clips. It's actually kind of funny. And so apparently it's one of the top Nickelodeon properties, and we play VR, license it. So it's basically it's a co-op multiplayer job simulator. When I said that to Frank Costantino from Namco, he looked insulted. I didn't mean it as an insult at all. Everybody wants to think they're doing original shit. But the best stuff is built on other stuff, and it just keeps improving and improving. And so Job Simulator is a phenomenon. It's one of the most popular VR arcade games still to date. It's popular with kids. It's popular with adults. And what they've done is they've created a 3-player social version of that. So you're on a food truck, and the 3 of you are trying to make food and serve food to your customers. And you've got to work the grill and the fryer and the soda machine and the shake machine, and stuff catches fire, and you have to put out the fires. And there's a squirrel that comes in and steals your food, and you have to, throw the squirrel out the window. And then there's a vacuum cleaner that cleans up the stuff you spill on the floor. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. And it's got a lot of potential. It's not ready for prime time yet. It's still not ready for release, but the audio was terrible. I couldn't hear the instructions. The player-to-player communication wasn't working. And so we couldn't communicate with each other. So we had to yell to each other, which means we couldn't hear the instructions or the environmental effects, even worse. FECs and trade shows are loud. And so so without the player-to-player communication, I don't think it works at all. But if they get that figured out, I think it could be really fun. It was a 7-minute game, but it took us almost 7 minutes to figure out what was going on. So they're going to have to really, and now they're talking about shortening it to 5 or 6 minutes. And I think that when you shorten a game, you have unintended consequences. And, you know, they're going to have to figure out how to make sure that by shortening it, people still figure out what's happening. I do see that it has replay value because you play through the first time and you're not really sure what's going on until the end. Then you want another crack at it. And so I could see it working. It's about 70 grand for 3 players, backpack based. They got to work on the throughput. It was really kind of slow watching them put people through. And so I think that 3 units in a backpack in a small space has some throughput issues. I did the math with Nick DeMatteo from Dave & Buster's, and, you know, we could see this thing doing a couple to a few grand a week. Frank was trying to convince me it was doing 7 to 9 grand a week in a FEC in an early test, and we couldn't make the math work. So I'm going to go back to Frank and have him sharpen his pencil. But definitely one to watch. I've been watching the We Play VR guys, and, you know, slowly but surely they're figuring out how to build an attraction that might be able to make some money. So definitely keep an eye on that one. So yeah, I think that's the yeah, good point, Sashan. 3 players, and Vive Wireless has 3 channels. So yeah, the ability to go to a wireless would definitely help. And I'm not sure why they're not doing that. And I'll suggest that to them. I think that's a really good point. So I'll run that up the flagpole. So anyway, yeah, definitely worth checking out. And so next week we've got, I think I got Philip from Tower Tag joining us. I've got a huge slate coming up in the next few weeks. So on these deep dives. So we're going to get back into the deep dives over the next couple of weeks. I'll be at next week in San Francisco. I'll be at the VR Arcade conference and at the Microsoft Reactor. And don't forget, Thursday night, hopefully I'll see some of you guys. It's sold out, though, by the way, so no more tickets available. But I'll see you guys at One Dome. Even if you're not going to make the dinner, come join me at One Dome. We'll be at the bar afterwards, and maybe even beforehand, and checking that out. It's an amazing immersive attraction with 14 art installations using Microsoft HoloLens. Oh, one more thing I forgot to tell you. Shit. I did an augmented reality thing. I've got some video here. I'm going to use up the last couple of minutes. I totally spaced this. So I did a really cool augmented reality video. You guys didn't get to see this because they weren't really exhibiting. These guys flew in to show this to me, but it's a company called RealMax. And they have an AR headset that has an amazing field of view, which is my problem with AR, is the field of view sucks. It's like looking at the world through a keyhole. And that's why I don't like Hado. It's like why I don't like HoloLens. It's why I didn't like any of this shit, even Leap Motion. And these guys have, so I did a 3-minute demo.
Yeah, so there's like these boxes.
And after I took the headset off, I said, oh, fuck. I didn't think about the field of view. And it's the first time I did AR that had no field of view issues for me. It was really bright. I was in a bright environment. The resolution good. The hand tracking. They're using Leap Motion for hand tracking, which I think is interesting because you can't use the same cameras that use the slam tracking. So it's got 6 DOF tracking, slam tracking, and really accurate hand tracking.
4 fingers?
And so I think this thing's a game changer, and I think, you know, we got to figure out where to put it. But I'm probably going to be doing some work with these guys to try to figure out how do we implement augmented reality tech into location-based VR in a really meaningful way. So if you're interested in an AR headset that works, reach out to me directly. Send me an email at vrbob@bobcooney.com or PM me on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever. And let's talk, because I'm going to be helping these guys figure out the location-based VR landscape. But I was really, really happy with this. And then there was another big announcement that I forgot.
Really super comfortable, like light, almost don't feel like I'm wearing it. And I will tell you that I didn't think about field of view once. And every other headset I've done, immediately I'm like, the fucking field of view is shit. And I never even thought of it. It never entered my mind until it was over.
There you go. So that was my, and then there was one other big announcement at the show that I think is worth talking about. So Minority Media announced a deal with Lucky Hammer, and they're going to be bringing Apex and Nightfall to their 12 by 12 4-player system that's running Chaos Dome now.
Mike, he wants to use you as a weapon.
Boys, take him down.
And so these are two games that were only available on Star VR headsets up until now. In the VR. Actually, I think this one was available in a place in Sweden. And this is a really cool prototype. Right? Got to try out an early prototype of and they're creating multiplayer versions of the game that are exclusively available on the Minority Media platform coming up sometime this year. And so those guys are really ramping up their content strategy, and that's been you got to have a content library now. But I think the thing that I think these guys are doing is they're not only bringing a big content library, but the games are all AAA games. And so I think those guys in a 12-foot box, 4 players with AAA games, I think they're going to be a player in this space. So I think they're going to force, and the good thing is they're going to force everybody to up their game. I think I'm really interested. I haven't done the Angry Birds game from Hologate this year, so I'm really anxious to see if they finally nailed a really good game. I've been really critical of the Hologate game so far. I don't think any of them have really good core loops yet, and high replayability. And so we'll see what happens. But I think Minority Media is going to be pushing the envelope there. So anyway, so that's an hour. That was my Amusement Expo wrap up. I really appreciate you guys watching and tuning in every week. I asked you one thing is share the link to the Demio webinar registration. I want to build the user base for this. This will go up on YouTube today. So share the YouTube link, and also watch out for the webinar, the panel sessions on YouTube. I'll be putting them up over the next couple of weeks and sharing them, and also share those with your friends too. Share them on social media. Let's get this stuff out there, because it's about educating and informing the market so we have better experiences for consumers, better experience for products for operators, because as the ocean gets higher, all the boats get lifted, or there's something like that. So anyway, Bob Cooney coming to you from someplace in Las Vegas, and I will see you next week from San Francisco live with Philip from VR Nerds. We're going to be talking about tower tag, eSports, competitive VR, and all kinds of fun shit. So I hope you guys have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.